Daniel Reyes never raised his voice, not even on the night his mother-in-law told him, in front of the entire family, that he would never be good enough for her daughter. He simply nodded, finished his dinner, and drove home in silence. Most people in that family mistook his quiet for weakness. They had no idea that quiet, sometimes, is just patience running out slowly instead of all at once. Daniel had married Sophia Ellison 7 years earlier, in a small backyard ceremony neither of their families thought was enough. Sophia came from money, old money, the kind with a family name people recognized around Denver, a father who owned 3 car dealerships, and a mother, Patricia, who never once let anyone forget it. Daniel came from nothing, in comparison. A single mother, a 2-bedroom rental, and a job repairing HVAC systems that he'd built, slowly, into his own small company. Patricia never said it outright at first. She was too polished for that. Instead, it came out sideways, at every holiday dinner, every birthday, every quiet family gathering. So, Daniel, still fixing air conditioners, she'd ask, smiling, swirling her wine, while Sophia's cousins exchanged glances across the table. "It's good, honest work," she'd add, in a tone that made honest work sound like a consolation prize. Sophia used to defend him, in the early years. She'd squeeze his hand under the table, or change the subject, or later, in the car, tell him not to let her mother get to him. But defending someone quietly, for years, has a cost, and somewhere along the way, Sophia got tired of paying it. By year 5, the comments had stopped bothering Sophia as much as they used to. She'd laugh along sometimes, a little too easily, when her mother made a joke about Daniel's little repair business, as if the joke didn't land anywhere near her own husband. Daniel noticed. He always noticed. He just stopped saying anything, because saying something had never once changed the outcome. There was a particular Thanksgiving, in year 4, that Daniel still thought about sometimes, even years later. Sophia's cousin had just gotten engaged to a surgeon, and the entire dinner table spent nearly an hour discussing the future wedding venue, the surgeon's residency, the house they'd already put an offer on in a gated neighborhood outside the city. Nobody at that table asked Daniel a single question about his work, not one, the entire evening. He remembered driving home that night, Sophia asleep against the window, and thinking to himself that invisibility, after enough years, starts to feel almost peaceful. You stop waiting for people to see you. You just keep building, quietly, for yourself. He never mentioned that Thanksgiving to Sophia. There didn't seem to be a point. Some resentments, he'd learned, only grow heavier the more you carry them out loud, and Daniel had never been a man who liked carrying extra weight he didn't have to. What nobody in that family knew, what Daniel had never once mentioned, not even to Sophia, was that his little repair business had grown into something else entirely over those 7 years. He'd landed 3 commercial contracts with major office buildings downtown. He'd hired 11 employees. He'd quietly built relationships with contractors across the state, the kind of relationships that don't show up at a dinner table, because Daniel had never needed anyone's applause to keep building. He kept it quiet on purpose. Partly because he didn't need Patricia's approval to feel proud of his own work. And partly, if he was honest with himself, because some small part of him wanted to see how long they would keep underestimating him before the truth caught up with their assumptions. That truth arrived on a Tuesday evening in early spring, at Sophia's father's 60th birthday party, held in the ballroom of one of the nicer hotels downtown, the same kind of room where people like Patricia felt most comfortable, surrounded by chandeliers and people who complimented her taste in centerpieces. Daniel had shown up in a simple gray suit, standing near the back of the room with a glass of water, the way he usually did at these events, present, polite, mostly invisible. Patricia found him near the bar about an hour in, clearly a few glasses of wine into the evening, and clearly in the mood to perform for the small crowd gathered nearby. "Daniel," she said, loud enough for heads to turn, "I have to ask, when are you going to get a real office? All this driving around in a van, fixing people's air conditioners. Doesn't it ever embarrass you, at your age?" A few people laughed, the nervous kind of laugh people give when they're not sure if it's actually funny, but they don't want to be the one who doesn't laugh. Sophia, standing a few feet away, opened her mouth like she might say something, and then didn't. She looked down at her glass instead. That, more than anything Patricia had ever said, was what finally settled something in Daniel's chest. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. He just smiled, calm as ever, and said, "Actually, Patricia, I do have an office. Downtown, on the 14th floor of the Meridian building. You've probably driven past it. My company installed the entire HVAC system for that building, and 2 others on the same block." The room went quieter than Daniel expected. Patricia blinked, clearly caught off guard, searching for the joke she assumed was coming. "Your company," she repeated, like the words didn't quite fit together in her mouth. "Reyes Mechanical Systems," Daniel said simply. 11 employees. Contracts with 4 commercial buildings downtown, and 2 hospitals outside the city. It started as a repair van, 7 years ago. It's grown a little since then. He said it without pride, without gloating, the same steady tone he used for everything. "I never mentioned it, because it never felt like something I needed to prove to anyone." Patricia's smile stayed frozen on her face for a moment too long. A man standing nearby, one of Sophia's father's business partners, leaned in and said, "Reyes Mechanical. We just signed with them for our new office building last month. Good crew. Reliable." He said it casually, with no idea what he'd just walked into, and Patricia's expression shifted like the floor had tilted slightly beneath her heels. Daniel didn't stay to enjoy the moment. That wasn't who he was. He simply excused himself, found Sophia's father across the room, wished him a genuine happy birthday, and left the party a little earlier than everyone else, the same quiet way he'd arrived. The car ride home was silent. Sophia sat beside him, staring out the window, clearly turning something over in her mind. About 10 minutes from home, she finally spoke. "Why didn't you ever tell me all that? The buildings, the contracts, the employees. Why did I have to hear it like that, in front of everyone?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "I told you the important parts, over the years. New contracts, new hires. You just weren't really listening, sophomore. Not the way you used to." He said it gently, without anger, but the words landed heavier than either of them expected. "I stopped bringing it up in detail because it started to feel like I was performing for an audience that already decided who I was." Sophia didn't answer right away. She sat with that in the silence, the same silence she'd offered him at 100 family dinners, only this time it was pointed back at her own life instead of away from it. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them, slowly, the way real change usually happens, not in one dramatic conversation, but in 100 small ones. Sophia started asking questions about the business, real questions, the kind she used to ask in the early years before her mother's opinions had quietly become louder than her own instincts. Daniel found himself talking more, not because he needed her approval, but because he realized he'd missed having a partner who actually wanted to know. One Sunday morning, Sophia asked if she could ride along with him to a job site, something she hadn't done since the very first year of their marriage, back when Daniel still drove the single repair van himself and Sophia used to bring him coffee between appointments, laughing at how seriously he took even the smallest jobs. She stood beside him that morning at the medical campus site, watching him talk through ductwork specifications with his foreman, completely fluent in a language she'd never bothered to learn. Afterward, sitting in the truck, she admitted quietly that she hadn't realized how much of his life she'd stopped being curious about. Daniel just nodded and started the engine. He didn't need an apology. He just appreciated, finally, being asked. Patricia, for her part, grew noticeably quieter at family gatherings after that night. The jokes about the repair guy disappeared overnight, replaced by an awkward, careful politeness that fooled no one. She never apologized outright, people like Patricia rarely do, but she stopped bringing up Daniel's job entirely, which, in its own way, was its own kind of admission. 6 months later, Daniel signed the largest contract of his career, a full mechanical systems overhaul for a new medical campus being built on the edge of the city, a project that would nearly double the size of his company over the next 2 years. He told Sophia about it over dinner, at their kitchen table, in the same quiet, steady voice he used for everything. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I mean that. Not because of the contract. Because of how you handled all of it. All those years, and you never once tried to make anyone feel small, even when they were doing it to you." Daniel thought about that for a moment. "I didn't need to make anyone feel small," he said finally. "I just needed to keep building something real, quietly, until the truth of it spoke for itself. People can underestimate you for years. It doesn't change what you're actually building, in the meantime." A year after that birthday party, Daniel opened a second location for Reyes Mechanical Systems, this time in a neighboring city, and hired a general manager to help oversee both branches. At the small opening celebration, Sophia stood beside him the entire evening, introducing him to people not as, "my husband, he fixes air conditioners," the way she used to, half joking, half apologizing, but simply as, "This is Daniel. He built all of this." Patricia came to the opening too, briefly, standing near the back the way Daniel used to stand at her events. She complimented the building, said something polite about how impressive it all was, and left within the hour. Daniel didn't need anything more than that from her. He'd stopped needing her approval a long time before that night at the hotel ballroom. He just hadn't realized it until the truth finally caught up with everyone else in the room. Looking back, Daniel never saw that birthday party as revenge, and he never wanted anyone to describe it that way. He hadn't built his company to prove Patricia wrong. He'd built it because it was his, because he believed in it, quietly, for 7 long years before anyone else in that family bothered to ask a single real question about it. The lesson, if there was one, wasn't about the size of the contracts or the number of buildings downtown with his company's name quietly attached to their systems. It was simpler than that. Some people will spend years underestimating you, measuring your worth by what fits easily inside their own assumptions. The quietest, strongest answer to that was never an argument. It was simply continuing to build, patiently, until the truth became too obvious for anyone left in the room to ignore.